in general, I think that my thoughts for what my expectation for Alabama is and what a successful season for Alabama is have not changed, right? My thoughts for Alabama, if anybody, when anybody has asked me, is I think that Alabama competes for the SEC title, and I personally having them winning the regular season SEC title. I have them competing for the conference title in the championship for the tournament. Whether they win that or not, we will see. And then, in my opinion, a successful season is getting to the Sweet 16, right? Getting to that second weekend. Do I think that Alabama has the team to make the Final Four? Absolutely. Do I think that Alabama has a team that could win the national title? Absolutely. Right? I saw what Alabama was able to do last season with what is clearly, in my opinion, an inferior team to this one. And Alabama, hung with UConn for what it was worth and for a bit of that first half. UConn, I thought, was an elite team last season, but I think that this Alabama team would have a much better chance. Obviously, we're going to have to see what happens when you bring in the pieces that have been hurt and when the games are actually played. But personally, yes, I do believe that Alabama has that ability, due to the defense, right, to make and win the national championship. Will they? We will see. So a couple of things that I want to make sure that everyone is aware of, because I know there have been a lot of questions about it. First things first, there have been a lot of discussions about red shirts, and I know I mentioned it last episode, and there were some questions about it. So Nate Oates, and I want to actually pull this up. Nate Oates. So Nate Oates went on a podcast this last week, or a couple weeks ago, and when he was on the podcast, he made mention of redshirting some guys, and it was something that was brought up by a few different people of, I wonder who that was going to be, right? On Twitter it was mentioned, and all over the place it was mentioned, like, hey, who is Nate Oates talking about potentially redshirting? The one that's the most obvious is Nas Cunningham, right? I don't think that the team is hiding that at all. In this scrimmage, he played just 6 minutes, and he is a freshman that's very undersized and was a little bit of an early bloomer, which is why he was the number one recruit coming out of high school 2 years before he was a senior. He obviously drops in the rankings a little bit. I think that it was well understood that when he came into this year, Nas Cunningham was probably going to redshirt, and that was probably even a part of his recruiting pitch. Hey, we want to bring you in. We're going to give you the offer. And we think that if you can play and develop in this system and get your body right by, over the next couple of years, you can be a really good player, right? So I think that was fully a part of the recruiting pitch. I think Nas Cunningham is almost a guaranteed he will redshirt. But if there is a second redshirt, and from what I have heard, there possibly will be. Nate Oates even mentioned it, and I believe it was the Eyes On. So it was on the One Shining podcast with Tate Frazier. Nate Oates was on, as I said, a couple of weeks ago, and mentioned that there potentially would be 1 to 2 guys. And there have been a lot of debates on who that second guy would be. From everything that I have heard, and the minutes in the scrimmages seem to clear this, that if somebody redshirts, an additional person redshirts in this system, is going to be Houston Millett. And the question that everyone's going to ask me is, why would Houston Millett come into the system from Pepperdine as a transfer and then redshirt? I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think part of the reasons for that is he did have an injury over the summer and was not able to practice kind of as much as I think he maybe would have needed to or wanted to. I do also think that from what I have heard, there have been moments where at Pepperdine he was not asked to do some of the things that we're asking him to do at Alabama, and he may not be as comfortable in the system as we thought he would have been at this point. I don't know if this was fully intentional coming in or not. And again, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but from everything that I have heard, the most possible person to redshirt outside of Nas Cunningham, which I think is a guaranteed certainty at this point, is Houston Millett. If he doesn't, I think that he can contribute, right? Obviously, we see in this Memphis game, he goes 3 for 5 from 3, 2 for 2 from the line. He ends up getting 2 defensive rebounds, has an assist. right? Like, I think he can contribute, right? I do. Versus Cunningham, I think Cunningham really needs the red shirt. I think he needs to work on his body. I think he needs to work on his physicality if he's going to compete at the higher level. I think that because of Millette's time in college and his ability to shoot as a spot-up shooter, I think that he absolutely can contribute. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem may be the things outside of just being a shooter. I don't think his defense is where Nate Oates would need it to be. I don't think his ability to set like ball screens and things like that we do in the flow of our offense are where they would need to be. That's my personal opinion. So if there's gonna be two people, the answer is Naz Cunningham and Houston Mallette. If there's only gonna be one, then the answer is Naz Cunningham, right? I do not think it's a guarantee that Mallette redshirts, but from what I have heard, it's a very high likelihood. I'll say that. The other thing I wanted to mention is kind of the coverage. So for all of the new people that are new to the channel, I cover Alabama basketball, and I've been doing these write-up threads. Andrew Parrish, one of our buddies that now actually works for HD Intelligence, he started these write-up threads, and I kind of continued them on last season. And so if you follow me on Twitter or on Substack, I'm going to be putting out pregame threads that are going to have a full write-up of all of the people that we're playing against, a rough idea of their style, who their head coach is, and what my prediction is for the game, right? It's going to be just a Twitter thread that's going to have, like I said, it's going to talk a little bit about the shooting splits. For these first couple of games, it's going to be a little different because we're not going to have the true shooting splits for the season. But later on in the season, we'll talk about shooting splits. We'll talk about, is somebody an elite rim protector in comparison to like KenPom numbers. We'll talk about all of that so that you kind of have an idea where my thoughts on this is I want you to be able to read this and know, hey, these are who the guys that we need to look out for in this game. They play the most minutes. They're the most instrumental in helping this team win. And so if Alabama can shut down this one person, we have a very good chance in this game, right? That's kind of the goal for the thread. And then obviously give my score prediction. I will also be doing pregame and postgame videos and podcasts the same way that I do for football season. So these are going to continue. I'm going to do pregame and postgame for every game. Obviously, some weeks I may do the post-game tied in with the pregame, just depending upon schedule availability. Sometimes I will break those up into two separate podcasts. But subscribe here to the channel on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel on whatever platform that you listen to your podcasts. And I will put out previews and recaps of every Alabama basketball game, the same that I've been doing with Alabama football, because actually basketball is where this channel started and where, I kind of got the idea for doing this, because I just don't think there's a ton of channels talking about Alabama basketball, and I knew that the content was something that people are definitely interested in, and the numbers have shown that, right? Based on my analytics that I've seen on the back end of YouTube, a lot of people are interested in Alabama basketball content. So that's kind of part of the reason why I put this together is I know that people are interested in it, and I'm a season ticket holder, and it's what I'm interested in as well, right? So I'm happy to do it. So the other things I want to talk about in terms of Alabama basketball is I think that with Chris Youngblood being out, I think that we will see some different lineups over the course of the beginning games. So I think the first three games, UNC Asheville, Arkansas State, McNeese State, if Alabama plays to their ability, I think Alabama wins all three and wins all three comfortably, right? That's not up for really discussion. I think that Alabama very clearly should be able to beat all three of these teams and very comfortably. The Purdue game, however, in West Lafayette, and, then you got Illinois and Birmingham before the Las Vegas tournament, and then North Carolina. This is a situation where I think that Nate Oates is going to have to kind of pick what lineup he thinks is going to be able to handle the environment, obviously in West Lafayette against Purdue. And I think that if this team is going to struggle without Chris Youngblood, or if this team is going to struggle to find its starting/rotation identity, it's going to be in that stretch of Purdue, Illinois, Houston, right? I don't think that that's a crazy thing to say because that's obviously like a very, very tough stretch. But I think that that's the moment in which not having, because I think coming into this season, the expectation is you can go Mark Sears, Latrell Wrightsell, Chris Youngblood, Grant Nelson, Cliff Amore. You got 5 seniors, and they're going to be able to go into any atmosphere and be able to compete with anybody, and that starting 5 is not going to get rattled by anybody. I think that because you have Chris Youngblood out until, earliest maybe the UNC game is a game that I've heard floated, for like earliest. I will say he did have his boot off at the Memphis scrimmage, so that's great to see, or Memphis exhibition, that's great to see. But he is not obviously going to be back for the first game. So when he is fully healthy, then obviously I think that's your lineup. But I think currently the question is going to be what happens at the 3, and how does LeBaron Philon and Aiden Holloway, and how do these guys really start to fully implement into this system with the full cast of characters, right? So I think that if there's going to be any hiccups with Alabama basketball, that's where you're going to see it. So do not be concerned if you see a little bit of a rocky start after the first easier games, before we get to that Purdue game in West Lafayette, because that game has a possibility to kind of really start testing what our lineup is and needs to be, moving forward. Now, I will say this as well, and it's something that I've said before, and I'll say it again. I think that this Alabama team, because of its defense, has the ability to be as good as any Alabama team we've ever had. I don't think that that's a crazy statement. That's part of the reason why this is the number 2 AP poll team, right? This team and what we've seen in their ability, right? Part of the benefit of that Memphis first half is Alabama really started the game very poorly, right? But because of our defense and Memphis's inability to make shots, Alabama was never out of this game, right? Alabama never lost the lead in that first half, or really in the game. So this is a standpoint where even though Alabama did not play its A game on offense, they were still up because of the defense, right? And that's something that we really didn't see last season. And I still think that because of who was out in that game and the scoring that we still saw output, I think that Alabama has the ability to beat a team by 40 or 50, especially some of these smaller teams. So don't be shocked if you see it, right? Don't be shocked that if Alabama's offense and defense is clicking in a game, that Alabama, by halftime, it's a 30-point game. And Alabama is just blowing somebody out of the water. Because I think that's a very real possibility. And I think that this Alabama team is going to surprise a lot of people that have not been paying attention, right? For anybody that's paid attention, you kind of know what Alabama has. But if you're from the outside looking in and you're just somebody that goes, I heard Alabama got some good guys this year, you're going to see some of these scores and you are going to be mind blown by what you see, right? Obviously, any of you watching the channel, you kind of have an idea. We've talked about it all off season. We talked about it last season. But that's, in my opinion, what you kind of need to be on the lookout for is I think that there could be some rocky starts around that Purdue, Illinois, Houston standpoint, right? If there's any chance of like an early season skid, I think that's where it happens. Probably, if something happens in the Purdue game where lineups get odd, the Illinois, maybe you see something different, and then obviously the team is going to try to fix it before they go out to to Vegas before that Houston game. Right? There's a possibility Alabama wins all those games big. But I think that if there's a chance that Alabama, has some schedule or some lineup issues, then that's the moment in which they're going to have them. And it's really going to be a standpoint of, how many minutes do we play each guy? Because in those first 3 games, I think that the lineup rotations are going to be able to be a little bit more loose. And then when you get obviously into tougher competition, the lineup's going to have to shrink and the rotations are going to have to shrink a little bit in order to meet the needs of those games, right? So that's kind of my thoughts of those games. I think that Alabama obviously has a very good chance of doing great things. I think that a number one overall seed's not out of the question. A national championship is not out of the question. It really just comes down to matchups. It comes down to how Alabama puts the what product Alabama puts on the court, what product Alabama actually plays. Do they get complacent? Do they get to a point, in the Memphis game, like Nate Oates was talking, where, we thought it was going to be easy, so you walk into a game and like, we can beat these guys, and so you don't put forth your effort, and then they score points, and you're playing catch up, right? That's what you don't want to see, right? That's what happens when you end up losing to Georgia and giving them their only win of the SEC slate that season, right? Alabama loses to Georgia. A very good Alabama team loses to Georgia in embarrassing fashion. And, just the up and down, right? That's what you don't want to see. You want this team to be mature enough in saying, like, hey, we need to put forth our best effort, right? Obviously, this last one was a Memphis exhibition. So since it did not count in the win-loss column, some of it can be excused. But now these games are legitimate, right? The rest of the games for the rest of the season, they all count. They all matter. And Alabama needs to play their best brand of basketball if they want to raise the trophy at the end of the season and be able to hang another banner. As you see right behind me, that's the Final Four, replica Final Four banner. We're looking to raise another banner, and this time we don't want it to be Final Four. We want it to be a national title. So in order for Alabama to do that, they need to play their best brand of basketball, and we're going to see what happens, right? So I will see you guys in Coleman Coliseum. I will do a full preview breakdown of the UNC Asheville game. That's going to come out probably Friday or Saturday. I will put that out. May record it either Thursday or Friday night and put it out on Saturday. And so that will break down that. And then, of course, we will do a double preview next week for the Arkansas State LSU game. Just as kind of a little bit of a programming note, I am going down to Baton Rouge for that game. So I'm actually going to, unfortunately, miss the Arkansas State game. I have gotten that ticket to an Alabama fan that ensures me they're going to use it. So I'm going to be driving down to Baton Rouge. So I will do a preview breakdown of the LSU football game as well as the Arkansas State basketball game. And then I will do the recaps of those after I get back on Sunday. We're driving back Sunday morning, so I should have time to record it. And it's going to go out probably a little later Sunday than I typically go out, but those episodes will go out Sunday afternoon for everybody to be able to recap kind of those two games. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really appreciate all the support on all the basketball content as well as the football content. And I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.